Let's get into URLs, or Uniform Resource Locators. This is the most common form of a Unified Resource Identifier, or URI, and it's commonly known as the web address. The examples here show something that should be fairly familiar to you. There's a URL given as developer.mozilla.org with the protocol given at the beginning here, path to some directory, or even a variable value pair. All of this is something that we'll be looking into. The most comprehensive URL, spelling out all the parts that are possible, is given down here, and we'll look into the various parts. So we start out with the protocol. That is the leading part of the URL, given here as HTTP. The protocol is trailed by a colon and 2 forward slashes. Common protocols that you may have happened across is HTTP, HTTPS, that's specifying the hypertext transfer protocol, and the S at the end is the secure version of it. This is the protocol for the common business that you deal with on the internet. Your YouTube, Amazon are transferred through the HTTP or HTTPS protocols. Another common protocol used to be FTP, the file transfer protocol. Modern browsers don't support this anymore, but there are still plenty of servers that support it. So if you have other software that understands FTP, you can still retrieve data through that. There's a large range of other protocols here, Mail2, which would support email sending via the Send Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP. Next comes the domain name. This can be of varying complexity depending on the organization. You can have different top-level domains such as .org, .edu, like alaska.edu, .com, .de. They are generally assigned to specific meanings. So .edu is reserved for educational institutions. Org is for nonprofit organizations. You can register your domain at a registrar. They keep track globally of what domains exist for what top-level domains. And then once you have registered your domain, for instance, alaska.edu, you can also have various subdomains, like University of Alaska. We have many different subdomains. Here's an example for the GI, the Geophysical Institute, gi.alaska.edu or asf.alaska.edu. They all point to different parts on the same web server or to different web servers, depending on how the routing is set up. www. Traditionally, in the early web days, was used to distinguish the web server from, say, the FTP server, where we had FTP dot, or the mail server, SMTP, mail dot. All of these ran different protocols. www dot, generally understood, HTTP, was set up to deliver websites in HTML. Lastly, domain names make it known to the public that you are talking about the internet. Everybody knows when you're saying example.com that this is something that lives on the internet. The next part that is possible to specify in a URL is the port, here given as :80. Generally indicates which entrance to a server is to be used. You can envision this really as a number of physical ports that you could walk through. Obviously, that's implemented in software, but it tells the server where the user would like to gain entrance. Many of the protocols that we are using have default ports. For instance, HTTP is generally port 80 or port 8080. Using this :80 here is redundant. If the protocol is running on the default port on the server, then we can leave that out, and usually you don't even see the port. But if you had to specify one, you could, with the colon, and then the port number, and the specifications for URL require for any web server to understand what is going on. Following that, either with the port or without the port, is the path to the file, or the path that is given. Here it is /path/to/myfile.html. So this is a static HTML file that is living on the server in the subdirectory path, which has a subdirectory to, which contains my file.html. It used to be the actual path to the physical file on the web server, but as technology has evolved, there are ways to change the configuration that this is more a symbolic path to some file or to some data that may not agree with the actual physical location of a file or of the data anymore. The next part is the one that you probably have come across many times and had no idea what is going on. It always seems very cryptic at the end of the URL. We have question mark and some key value assignments. Many websites have this to keep track of who the current user is, what their choices were, and other information. This really is key value pair. So this is a variable that the server or some program that is running on the server can use internally with a value that is assigned here. And here I say key 1 gets the value 1 and key 2 gets the value 2. So these key value pairs are given to the web server. They interpret them and they respond dynamically to the request. And you may be able to exploit this part if you actually read it and try to understand it just a little bit in your download scripts. You could be putting together that URL, either the path to files dynamically that we looked at before, right? If this path shows, for instance, a year and a month in it, you could dynamically change that in a script to download all the data for all the months in many years. Or maybe key 1 here is not called key 1, but it's called start time. And then you have some kind of time value here that is formatted in a way, and this might be end time, and then you might have some additional time string over here that you can format. And instead of having to go through the web interface to set all of these parameters, you could just build the URL yourself, use a command line tool that then perhaps can download the data for you. The last piece of the URL is the anchor that is always started with hash symbol or octothorpe. Here it says somewhere in the document. It is some kind of bookmark. When a website that is being sent to your browser has these bookmarks embedded, then the addition of the anchor allows the browser to scroll the website to that book in the document. Often, say on Wikipedia, you might see a table of contents at the top with a number of entries that are links that you can click on. And these are generally implemented as anchors. And then you click on the link and the website goes up and takes you to the subheading. You might recognize that now the URL in the top actually ends with a octothorpe and some heading information here. This is something that a developer needs to put into the HTML websites. That's generally not something that you can add